Cool. And we're live on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good evening, members. Good evening, councillors. Good evening, anybody, members of the public who happen to be watching to this meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. First item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Have we had any apologies?
I've not received any apologies, but as always, happy to take any people may have passed on through councillors.
Okay, I can only see one member who's not here. Maybe she'll join later. Pardon? What was that? Oh, well, we'll carry on anyway. Minutes of the previous meeting. Do we have the minutes of the previous meeting? Everybody's read those. Does anybody have any comments? Can we take those as correct?
It's brilliant, it really is. And if you know a child actually that's struggling with their reading, and we know that so many are following the disruption to schooling this.
No, gone. Wonderful. Declarations of, minutes of the meeting. Everybody agrees they're okay. Yes? Thank you. I will sign those when I next get an opportunity in Surrey Heath House. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of interest, either pecuniary or non-pecuniary, with regard to the items on the agenda for this evening? No? Good. Internal audit, annual audit plan. I believe this is, where are you? Alex, there you are. Hiding.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'm proposing to bring to the committee this evening is a report on the internal audit plan, which is basically our work programme for the internal audit team at Surrey Heath for the forthcoming financial year. Now, the main detail in the plan is attached to Annex A, but I noticed at the bottom that a couple of lines may have been missed off the committee report. I'm not sure if you've got a breakdown of resources on yours. Have you afterwards, Chairman, or not?
I have not, no.
No. So does yours stop at fraud prevention? Is that your last bit there? Yeah.
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 That could be the last bit. Okay. Normally we have a breakdown of resources, but I'll cover that very briefly if I could during the brief presentation.
Okay.
So if I could, Mr. Chairman, just bring a couple of items to the attention of committee as we go through the report. What I've tried to do is I presented the audit plan to CMT already. So I've got management approval at Surrey Heath. They're generally happy with the audit plan. And I've also asked them if they had any specific areas they wanted us including this year, which weren't past the audit plan. No one came back to me with anything specific. So I took that they were generally happy with the detail of the audit plan. So that's that bit covered. The audit for this year is based on the 3 audit plan. If you can remember, Mr. Chairman, that the 3 audit plan was presented to committee last year, I think this time last year, and it was approved at that point. So basically a 3-year plan is an outline of the 3 individual years. And what our intention is to operate the audits on a rotation-based system. So the idea would be that we would try and cover all the main areas of the council at least once every 3 years. So that's the plan. So we want to give assurance to management across the council that all their areas are covered as far as possible within our control within those 3 years. So I thought I'd mention that to you.
Yep.
The other thing to bear in mind is obviously the work that internal audit does is just one area for management that helps Surrey Heath provide this combined level assurance. So if you remember, we mentioned last week at the chairman's briefing, there are other areas that other services place reliance on. It's not just the work of internal audit to help manage internal control and processes and procedures. So services, for example, if you take the IT service, every year they need to do a compliance against information security, like an ISO 27001. So they'll get reliance on them, an independent body coming in to do information security, as well as the work of internal audit. So I thought I'd mention that as well. I'm not sure how many members know, but the council's just invested in a new HR system, HR and payroll system. So it'll be my intention to audit that quite heavily this year as part of the HR and payroll audits to give assurance to CMT and members that the new HR system is operating as it's expected to be. There's an area within the plan that covers community services. Now we've allocated a number of days to that. That'll be quite an interesting one because obviously only recently a chunk of the community services team have been tupied across within the Runnymede partnership. So I'll need to obviously thrash out with management here as to how much added value we can help with that service if it's being run now by Runnymede, but I'm sure there could be some partnership working there. Another area I've written down is the impact in which COVID may have on service delivery this year. So obviously we've all been through COVID and we're still starting the recovery phase now, but I thought what would be quite useful in our internal audits the forthcoming year is when I'm trying to agree the scope and the areas to cover with management, I think it would be quite a good idea for each of those audits to say, to try and have an idea as to how COVID has impacted that service delivery on that service and whether it's affecting the risk of that service delivery and the materiality and things like that. So that's something that I can obviously report back to members another time. In terms of resourcing of the plan, we aim to, it's quite a realistic audit plan, but obviously we operate with quite a small team, Chairman. There are only 2 full-time members of staff operating internal audit. Now that's the system we've had for the last few years, and obviously my aim will be to deliver as much of that audit plan as we can within the existing budget which has been agreed. Okay, so that's that. Another thing is, in previous years I've done a breakdown of the number of audit days that we're expecting to deliver each audit piece of work by. I've slightly changed that tack this year because what I want to do is when I'm agreeing the scope of the audit with each individual manager, whether that's in planning or regulatory or finance, depending on the scope and how much work we'll need to do to help manage controls and risks, that will determine how many days I want to assign to that particular work. Because in years gone by, I may have allocated 8 or 10 days, but depending on what we find in the audit, that could increase the number of days or reduce it. And we have operated contingency. I just wanted to flag that up to members tonight, if I could. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to bring to the attention of committee. So I'm happy to open it up to a Q&A. And I suppose the other thing, the purpose of the report is to get agreement from members as to the forthcoming annual plan, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor needs some new teeth. Mile Vaganham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad you are in the same group as I am. Having said that, to the officer, Alex, thank you so much. I mean, the great listing, as we agreed, it's a 3-year plan. I see that in your report, you actually say 430 man hours or whatever it is. Yeah. Now, even this was brought up, I believe, at the last time you presented such a report. Having worked in audit, etc., do you actually genuinely believe you have adequate staff to cover this? Because if you are going to go and agree with every department the scope of the work, that you can't define the time because it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem, if you got to the 430, somebody wants X, Y, and Z. If you try and allocate that, you're going to take a shortcut. Realistically, shouldn't you be speaking to the CMT to request for more resources for your department? because what we as a committee, or what I in the committee would like to see, is the exact allocation of the number of days you would like to allocate to each one of these things. That's point one. I just want to cover 3 points or 4 points. Secondly, working with external auditors. How much of their work can you help them with? Not that it's your statutory duty, it's their statutory duty to come and ask you. Help them with, to help them finish their audit a little bit faster. And the other 3 are just items on the listing itself. Like you have already identified community services. Now we actually do that with Runnymede. Maybe that's an additional resource you may need, because or sell the whole thing to them, say that you will sell it to, you will do the audit and they pay for it. Something clever like that, yeah? And insurance is something you really, I mean, every 3 years for insurance, I mean, we are in a pandemic. We don't know what's going to go pear-shaped. Again, you would have to speak to the Section 151 officer to actually work this one out carefully, because this is an area we may get hit if something goes pear-shaped, yeah? And finally, procurement and contract. This is an area which I'm very, very particular about, because we as an organization need to be fully compliant with the procurement process. And I, as a committee member, and also the Performance of Finance Scrutiny Chair, am very concerned or insistent that as a council, we follow the process carefully, because it seems sometimes we may have missed it in the past. So those are the points I have to make. You can take one at a time or cover them all at one big go. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Alex, do you?
Shall I? I'll start with the procurement one, because I may have forgotten your initial one. So in terms of the procurement, you're quite right. I think one of the reasons for us being in place is to try and ensure that rules, protocols, processes and procedures are in place and are working and are being complied with by staff. So in terms of contracts and procurement audit, for example, obviously the council runs to a set of contract standing orders and financial regulations. And that would be my starting point, certainly for conducting that piece of work, would be to look at, right, what does the council have in place in terms of its benchmark, and how can I demonstrate to management members that that benchmark is actually being complied with? So in terms of looking at different purchasing of goods or services or tender exercises, one of my jobs will be to check to see whether the rules that are contained within the council's contract standing orders and standing financial regulations are actually being complied with. And if there's any variance from that, my job would be to obviously flag that up with services or members and management. And I've certainly done that in the past. In terms of the frequency of auditing procurement, there is an argument for auditing it annually, but then again, the more audits we audit annually, there are fewer days available for other audits to make sure we get round all services every 3 years. So I suppose it's partly a balancing act to make sure that internal audit covers every area of the council every 3 years. And the more audits you audit annually, there's less scope and less facility for us to actually deviate from that and audit all the other areas. I suppose that would be my point. And what was your middle point, Councillor?
You're muted.
Sorry, on mute. You're on mute, Councillor. Oh.
My apologies.
Oh yeah.
Insurance.
Oh yeah, insurance. Yes. Yeah. So we've got that in the plan to audit every 3 years. What I would say about that, and Section 151 can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are certain audits we actually cover some aspects of insurance on anyway each year. So take, for example, cash and bank. If you look in the plan, we carry out a cash and bank audit. That's done every year. As part of that audit, within the scope, we actually look to see whether the council's being safeguarded in terms of its like safe insurance levels and cash in transit insurance levels, and banking insurance levels. So we actually cover that aspect within the cash and bank audit. And the section 151, will testament to this, but we just finished a capital accounting audit, and there were some areas in there that internal audit had to recommend for possible improvements in terms of the delivery and working with Sutton, wasn't there? Section 151 about insurance. So I've recommended a couple areas in there which finance have agreed to. So I suppose you could argue that we are actually covering some aspects of insurance and other audits each year, but to mop it all up and do an overarching report, internal audit on insurance, we do that every 3 years. Now, whether that's enough for members, that's for discussion, but that's how we're doing it at the moment.
Okay,
And
can I add something to that? Maybe Officer Martin Horn can actually help you out outside the meeting. I'm more concerned about the public liability and the services we provide. If there are any claims against us, which we are not fully covered and we don't want to be dipping into our reserves, that sort of stuff also need to be looked at carefully. And you need to look to see whether we are covered on all aspects of the insurance policy we may or may not have on those aspects. And the next point I want to raised was the community services, which we are currently doing jointly with Runnymede.
Oh yes, and there definitely is scope for partnership work there. To take your point, Councillor, if we just look at joint waste, the joint waste, we do an internal audit. It's in the plan annually at the moment, but we carry out an internal audit of the joint waste on behalf of the 4 partners. So the 4 partners involved in the joint waste contract are obviously us, Mole Valley, Elmbridge and Woking, but not all four partners don't do the internal audit. It's only Surrey Heath that does that. And we are hopefully we'll be in discussion at the next partnership board meeting in terms of either one of the other partners doing the internal audit next year, so on a reciprocal basis, or we charge them for that piece of work.
Are you actually telling the committee today that we don't charge them for the work you have already done? I mean, that doesn't seem right to me.
No, it's not my understanding that we have done to date, no. I think it's built into the JWS budget for how they manage and deliver the contract.
Maybe Section 151 officer, you should take that to the CMT, because it would be totally unacceptable for us to provide a free service for the other partners.
Yeah. Through you, Chairman, I think as Alex Middleton has said, I mean, at the moment, we, as far as I understand it, we don't charge them for it, so we have been provided that free. But that's, as you say, I think we have to look at the contract. So we'll definitely do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
And I had 2 more points. One was actually working with the external auditors. Maybe you can explain that a little bit more.
Yes, I can do. So if you have a look at the top of the annual plan, I've got a breakdown of what's called the fundamental audits. Those are the historically, Councillor, those are the audits that we help to deliver, and the pieces of work are there ready for external audit to dip into or dip out of as much or as little as they choose to. So they know those audits are done on an annual basis. We do an internal audit report to management, and we provide a series of recommendations. Those files, those working papers and the audit reports are there for external audit to place as much or little reliance as they choose to. And they've done that in the past. So in the previous auditor, before BDO, the current auditors, the previous auditors, KPMG, they used to ask to see all our working papers, and they would trawl through those and then ask us some supplementary questions for clarification or such like. The current auditors haven't asked to see the audit files, but they have asked to see some of the audit reports, and they certainly asked to see the committee reports where I summarise the work of internal audit to committee as well as the annual plan. Now, whether or not Section 151 feels that that's another discussion for BDO to maybe help speed up some of their work or some of the questions. That's obviously for discussion for someone else. But in terms of my experience of working with the external auditors, the work is there for them to have a look at as much as they would like to.
Thank you for that. And finally, of course, this again was raised last year, is about staffing with the internal audit.
Oh, yes.
Like I said earlier, I've been in audit donkeys years ago, mind you, but this is not, it is a tedious job. I can't see how you could cover quite a bit of that, particularly when you're actually negotiating with every department.
Yeah.
The scope they want covered, or
Yeah.
they would like to be covered, and you would like to cover a bit
Yeah.
more or less, whatever it may be. Can you genuinely cover it within the 430 man hours? I believe it's going to be a tough call, and maybe Section 151 officer whom I presume you report to, he doesn't report to you, Martin?
Through you, Chairman, no, the internal audit are part of, oh gosh, I've got
Transformation.
Sorry?
Transformation.
Transformation, I forgot, Louise Livington's area.
Department.
Internal audit report to
Okay.
transformation.
Yeah, so my
Sorry.
my direct reporting line is through the executive head of transformation, but I also have a dotted line through the audit chairman, the chief exec, and the Section 151 officer.
That's right.
Okay, great. But maybe you should have a serious conversation with your direct report as well as with the dotted line reports to see whether you have adequate staffing.
Yeah.
For me, I would rather spend a little bit more manpower to get the internal audit sorted for once and for all. Thank you very much. Thanks, Alex.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's, I'll come to you in a sec, Councillor Bates. It's just worth noting that we are looking at ISO 9001, and that will require resource, and that's going to impact on the yearly plan as well. So I think adequate resourcing of your department is something that needs to be looked at quite seriously. Thank you. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a few points as well. So the first point has just been covered actually by Councillor Wagham to some degree, which is about this joint waste contract. And I would be very surprised if we have not already included it as part of our lead arrangements, because as I understood it, and I may be wrong, I've not seen the actual contract itself, I thought we were the lead for this particular contract, and therefore if you're the lead, other people would pay towards us acting as the lead, if you like. I was particularly interested in this one because, of course, joint waste has a few issues at the moment, if I can put it delicately, regarding some of the wider problems that we all know about, and we don't need to kind of go into them even more. But that seems to me an extremely important audit for the coming year. So whether it is done by Mr. Middleton or whether it's done by Mr. Middleton in conjunction with others is something that I certainly think we need to be giving as a priority. So I would welcome that research as to who the contract aspect on that. I think that is very important. And just to be clear that whether it's in there already or if not, that it's chargeable or that support is available. The second point I want to make is about community services, because this is actually the reverse of the previous point. Runnymede now run these, basically. It's a joint arrangement, but they're the lead. So we are presumably allowing them to run it. So I don't understand why it's in our audit, because it's now their service. It says it's joint, but it's under their processes, it's under their procedures. So yes, it is a joint service, but it isn't, because all the staff are at Runnymede. So we can't really say that is ours, no matter how it's dressed up. It is theirs, they've chupied over. So I don't see why we would be doing an audit for it, because I don't know what's left. It's certainly not centres for older people. So perhaps that could be clarified. What, if any, fee we would pay them? Just to be clear about that. The other two, I think, are more concerning about the actual plan itself. And it's unfortunate that some of it appears to be missed off, because that does present me with a bit of an issue tonight in terms of whether to vote for it. Because firstly, we don't have anything on here regarding how many days would be allocated to each. It's difficult to agree a plan if you don't know how much resources is allocated to it. And the other piece of information, which is usually here but isn't, is when that particular area was last done. So although it does say annual or every 3 years, it hasn't actually got the year of when we last did the audit. So in principle, it might have been 2 or 3 years ago, but actually sometimes we miss years. And I think I just always am concerned if we miss things over a long period of time. So that is unfortunate that's not on this report, and obviously some other areas are not for whatever reason. So it does present me with an issue as to whether I can support it tonight, or at least I support the principle of it, obviously, but whether we perhaps need to delegate the chairman to agree it following that information which is circulated around, or something to that effect.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. Just for your information, we did discuss this very point at the chairman's briefing last week, and I asked for a sort of rolling programme where everything that gets audited is shown, and then we can see when it was done and when it's next due. And I think that would be very useful going forward. And as was the matter of Runnymede, that is still open to discussion, as I understand it. Alex, would you like to comment on that?
Going back to Councillor Bates's comment on the audit, obviously I drafted this audit some time ago because it had to go to CMT. So it was circulated around CMT a few weeks ago, and they didn't object to community services piece of work being in there. So obviously if 100% of what Surrey Heath used to deliver has all transferred across, then I would have thought management would have picked that up and said, look, there's absolutely nothing for you to look at here, you need to drop it. So I'm just wondering whether there are any parts of that service that are still in-house and haven't fully transferred across, or whether in fact management wants me to look at the successful transfer of that piece of work across to Runnymede. So obviously, you know, that might be a valuable piece of work because we could actually see the successes and barriers to how the council's delivering services in partnership with other authorities, and maybe we can learn from that by having an internal audit of that piece of work. So there is certainly scope for areas I would have thought that we could look at, even if it's not looking at the direct service delivery. It could be how we're working in partnership with another authority to deliver the service for the residents, maybe. As I say, I without discussing with management, I haven't thought about it in too much detail.
Thank you. Martin Hone, sorry.
Chairman, if I may, actually, just to support that point that Alex has just made, yeah, absolutely. I think like one of the things I'd say is whenever there's a significant change in the way in which a service is delivered, it's really important the internal audit go in there and have a look to make sure that we've made a clean break, that the TUPE, the transfer of staff has worked properly, that the allocation of overheads has worked properly, that there's been a proper transfer of supporting equipment, and all these various things have been done properly. So it's just to make sure that that everything has been done properly. So that's, I would expect that would probably be the last time that would appear on the internal audit programme, but it is just that to give it a final once over to make sure that the separation of duties is correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bates, did you want to come back?
Yeah, that still seems a bit confusing to me. I thought everyone had moved over by the 1st of April. So I accept this point about there be a bit of kind of hangover, but ultimately that is Runnymede. That isn't us. So I'm not entirely clear what we would be internally auditing. Now, there are community services. I've just looked on the council website, and I can't be certain whether the social prescriber has moved over. But I had understood, and Councillor Mansfield is on the call, so he may know more than me, but I thought it was pretty much everybody. So I'd just be interested to know what we would be auditing. If maybe it was just an oversight, or maybe there is a plan, but I don't know what the plan is. I think it'd be helpful to do that. So yeah, and in terms of the joint waste, which I just think that is an area which we as members are getting more and more concerned about. And so I think that would be helpful to spend more time over this year, whether it is you or whether it is jointly. I'll leave the detail and the points already been made about who pays for it, but we certainly need that looked at in a bit more detail this year.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Chair.
Councillor Malvaganam.
I would like, some valid points have been raised on this particular thing, and I would highly recommend this minuted well so that CMT can follow this through, because there's quite a few items outstanding or being pushed back to CMT, and it's absolutely relevant that the CMT looks at it carefully. I'm very concerned about Mr. Middleton's department being such a small department and with the workload, I just cannot see how it can be effectively done. That's one. And Councillor Bates's point about Runnymede and JWS and all that stuff is also very, very important. I mean, it is money we can earn as much as we have to pay. So it's absolutely crucial that we get it minuted properly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, nobody else? No comments? No more questions? Excellent. Alex.
Sorry to trouble you, Chairman. Just in terms of a personal point of view, obviously I would never say no to additional staffing. So obviously I'd always welcome additional staffing. It's a case of obviously how that can be exploited or delivered in a budget that's already been signed off by members, I guess. And I'd just like it noted that obviously I would never turn down additional staffing if it was to be presented to me.
I think we can take that one as read. Okay, so with all the issues that have been discussed, are we happy to approve the work programme as presented, given that it may be altered slightly in respect to events? Yes or no?
No, I would like it seen it amended to the points which Councillor Bates raised. I mean, the work done in the past and the time it requires. Mr. Middleton has been kind enough to tell us he's got to negotiate with each department. So that's
a rolling program.
Yeah, rolling program. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we also need to know when it was done last.
Oh.
Thank you.
So if we could have that sent out to members in the next week to 10 days.
Yep.
Is that feasible, Alex?
Yes, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Bates.
Thanks, Chairman. My position is that I would be happy to note and approve this in principle, but I would prefer it if the final plan, including the piece of information, was perhaps delegated to yourself and the Vice Chairman, so that is then finally agreed, because I would like to see that. I'm happy with the general principle, and so that Alex can start his work. I certainly don't want to stop that, but I do think that the final area with the amount of resourcing and that kind of thing. So I would prefer it to the final. I'm not passing the buck, but I would suggest the final decision is actually should be yourself and the Vice Chair. But we agree in principle, subject to minor changes by yourselves. Something like that. I'm sure that our officers can prefer that wording.
We happy with that, Darryl? Good. Okay. So are we agreed to do that? Agreement in principle? Anyone against? No. Lovely. Thank you very much. Right. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Audit of 2019-20 financial statements progress update to receive from BDO. The current status. How do we do this?
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to talk you through the paper this evening?
Yeah, I think so. Martin, is that the way we go?
Yes, Chairman. I was just going to suggest that, if you don't mind, just to say that obviously Steve Bladen and Michael Asari-Bediako of BDO, our external auditors, are here. Also, obviously myself, Section 151 officer, and Adrian Flynn, who's the council's deputy Section 151 officer. So obviously between the four of us, I think we should be able to deal with any questions that the committee have. But I think, as Steve says, probably the best thing is if BDO take us through their progress report.
What I'm kind of alluring to is alluding to is, can you take over the screen and show your like we do with planning? You know, show the presentation.
Can you do that, Steve?
I can try, Martin. I hadn't particularly prepared a presentation. The only document I've prepared is the report
Oh,
that's before
okay.
you
So this is
this evening.
I viewed it as a presentation on my laptop, so I thought you were going to be doing that. Okay, no, carry on.
So all members have got it's annex to the report effectively for members' information. So that's what you're going to take us through now, then, Steve.
Yeah,
it was Martin.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
That's fine. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
all right. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So, as Chair's already said, the paper you have before us is a progress report on our 2019-20 audit. So what I'll do is I'll take you through the key aspects of the work that we've completed to date, and then just give you an update on those areas where we've still got work left to complete. So I understand you've had this paper for over a week now, so I will assume it's been read and really just focus on the key aspects. So on page 10 of our report, we've set out the significant risks that we identified at the planning stage of our audit. And what you can see is that in respect of those risks, there's 3 where our work is substantially complete and we have no matters to bring to your attention. But then in respect of the other 3, our work remains in progress. So that's around the valuation of property, plant and equipment, around bad debt provisions, and around the valuation of property, plant and equipment. So firstly, if I just take you through the work in terms of Camberley Shopping Centre and the various retail units that surround that centre. So the valuation of those assets has fallen substantially during 2019-20. So they've fallen in value by around £42 million during that financial year. So what we've done is that for each of the properties that make up that shopping centre, we have tested the key inputs into the valuer's calculations. So for example, we would have looked at the lease income that's been received by the council. In some instances, we would have looked at the size of those properties. But what we've also done, and I think it's important members understand this, is that we have engaged a member of our own valuations team to consider the assumptions that was made by your valuer when he came up with that value. So overall, our conclusion is that the yields that have been adopted by your own valuer are reasonable based on the benchmark data that our valuer has been able to obtain and some additional questions that we asked of your valuer. So on that basis, we're satisfied that the values attributed to each of those valuations is a reasonable valuation. As I said, there are a number of individual valuations that make up the total valuation of that shopping centre. And on pages 15 to 18 of our report, we've set out what those key assumptions are and what our findings against each of those are. In terms of the local government pension scheme and the council share of the assets and liabilities of those, so we have now completed our testing of that liability. Again, we've set out in a fair amount of detail on pages 19 to 22 of our report the work that we've done to address that. So essentially, there's two key areas of our work. So firstly, we've written to the auditor of the Surrey Local Government Pension Fund Scheme to understand the results of their work on that. But we've also engaged our own auditor's expert who's reviewed the key assumptions adopted by the actuary in valuing the council share of the assets and liability. Now, we've identified a small number of errors which I understand will be corrected in the final version of the accounts, but essentially we don't have any significant concerns around the calculation of the council's liability or the council's share of the overall pension fund liability. If we move on to page 23, so we've set out there details of the work that we've undertaken in regard to collection of receivables balances. So that year-end receivables balance disclosed in the council's accounts is made up from a number of different sources. Now, in that area, our work is still in progress, either because we're still seeking to understand the process that management went through in determining a bad debt provision, or because there's no provision that has been made and we're seeking to understand the reasons why. So, for example, our understanding is that there is no bad debt provision on rent arrears or sundry receivables. What I was now just proposing to do is jump forward a bit in our report to pages 38 and 39. So on there, we've set out the most significant issues that we're still seeking to resolve with the council. So firstly, on page 38, we've highlighted what I would describe as the most significant numerical issues that we're currently discussing with management. Now, members will be able to see from the figures that are quoted on there that some of those figures are significant and they're above the materiality level that we've set for our audit. So if it does turn out that following the conclusion of our discussions with management, those are errors in the financial statements or in the draft financial statements, we would be seeking to ask management to adjust those draft financial statements. And then if I just move on to page 39, so we've listed out there those areas where we're still awaiting evidence to support some of the transactions and balances that are recorded in the draft financial statements. And so until we receive the evidence that we've requested, we won't be in a position to conclude our audit. But obviously we have ongoing discussions with management around when that is likely to be provided. Before I take any questions, I just wanted to pick up the point that was, or the question that was raised earlier on working with internal audit. So as Alex did say, we do review the internal audit reports and they do inform our audit risk assessment. But I think it is fair to say that we don't place reliance on the actual testing that has been done to kind of give ourselves assurance over the transactions and balances disclosed in the council's accounts. But they do very much inform our risk assessment and where we see there being significant risks within the financial statements. So as I say, I'm happy to just a kind of quick progress report on where we're up to so far. Obviously happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Malveganum.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Steve, again. I have read your report, your progress report. Yes. What's so disappointing is today is the 26th of April 2021. We're way outside when we should have reported. I do accept the fact that there was COVID. I do accept the fact that Secretary of State had extended the date to November. In April, we are still looking at stuff which we haven't signed off, which I genuinely say this as Performance Finance Scrutiny Chair, on this is not a meeting for it, but as a chair, I find it absurd that we are discussing ongoing issues. If you take, I don't want to go through every page. Let's stick to page 39. I mean, look at the number of outstanding items. If you take the one point before that, which is a bad debt, surely by now, the 906,000 bad debt should have either crystallized or not provided. But it's still showing us outstanding. I'm disappointed because say before your predecessor came again, the accounts were late to be signed. I don't know what's happening, but to be honest, I'm confused. I'm disappointed, confused. I don't know whether the exec has been or the officers and the exec have been putting enough pressure on BDO to finish this job off. And then I look at the fee structure. You quote for 35,000. This job is running around so far at 66,000. Last year it ran at 99,000 pounds. I mean, I could go line by line, and we could sit here all night long. Yeah, that's not my intention. Intention is to very clearly state on behalf of this committee, if that's an agreement with the rest of the members, they can speak for themselves. I can speak for myself. I will very clearly tell you, as a professional chartered accountant, have worked in the audit for decades ago, mind you. Things have changed, I admit, but it couldn't have changed for 9 months, 10 months, 12 months. Now, in this case, it's over 13, 14 months after the year end. I mean, we are just sitting here talking about 2021, 2021 is finished. I'm not trying to lecture you, Steve, I promise you not. I'm just expressing my total disappointment with this whole process. I do appreciate you had to go through 3 CFOs. Yes, Martin's the latest CFO you're going through. Yeah, this is not this for a count. And also, I looked at the statistic that has been produced. Yeah, of the accounts that have been completed, which is something like 47 or 43%, if my memory is right. I can refer to the page, but I won't. Yeah, I mean, are there other accounts in the same place? If you also can tell me how many of those clients are BDO clients, how many of those clients are KPMGs, PwCs, and EY clients, or even for Grant Thornton clients? I just don't get it. I must confess, I simply don't get it. You now look at 39 and saying you're still waiting for the new CFO to provide this information. Personally, I think it's not acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Bladen?
Shall I respond on those points to start with, Chair? So in terms of the delay, yes, there's no question that the audit is a lot later than either you or we would like it to be done. If I just outline some of the reasons for that. So firstly, members will no doubt recall that last year's audit was very late, because of the number of issues that we identified with the draft accounts, having took that audit over from KPMG. So that did have a knock-on impact onto when we started this year's audit. So this year's audit was, again, started late. But there are specific reasons as to why audits are taking much longer. So firstly, there is an impact from COVID. We are all working remotely, and audits are taking a lot longer than they would do if we were working on site with the council's officers. There are also increasing regulatory requirements. So if I look at the amount of work that we have done around, for example, the valuation of property, plant and equipment, the valuation of pension liabilities, the work that we've done to address the risks around those is significantly more than will have been done in previous years. So certainly in the last 2 years, as a result of increased regulatory focus, we are doing a lot more work around those, and it is taking a lot longer. In terms of the work that's outstanding, I mean, we simply, in terms of what's listed as outstanding on both pages 38 and 39, we simply can't issue an audit opinion until those issues have been resolved. So we're having ongoing discussions with Martin and his team to resolve those, but we will not give an opinion until those issues have been resolved. In terms of the number of audits that are outstanding, so Councillor Sashi, you're right, there were a significant number that were still outstanding as at the end of November. So across all audit suppliers, I think it's fair to say there are 4 main suppliers. Around 43% of audits were completed on time. If I look to what the position was at the end of the end of February, there were still 150, around 150 local government audits for 1920 that were still in progress, and I think there was around 25 18-19 audits that were still in progress. So that's across all suppliers, that's not just limited to BDO. I will obviously accept that there were a number of those that are BDO, probably around 8 of those are, I think, are BDOs. So the issues that I outlined to you in terms of the increase in regulatory requirements, the impact of COVID, isn't just related to BDO. It's something that all audit suppliers are experiencing, and I'm sure that some members may have seen some of the reports in, for example, that SIPFA have published in their publication that sets out what those delays are. Just in terms of the fee structure, just very quickly. The reason that we have sought variations to the scale fee in previous years, and we are likely to do so again, it comes back to those increasing regulatory requirements, which simply means we are just doing a hell of a lot more on things like valuation of property, plant and equipment than was ever envisaged when those scale fees were set. I think the other issue for this council is obviously its asset base has changed significantly in recent years with the acquisition of the Camberley shopping centre. So I'll stop there, Chair, and obviously come back if there's any further questions or if members feel I haven't answered that question.
Okay.
Chair, I would like to come back later. Let me give
Okay.
others to say a few words. Thanks.
Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chair. Let's just pick up that last point first, because that was quite interesting. I wasn't going to raise that. But if I've understood what you're saying is that you quote for some work, but you're then required to undertake further regulatory aspects after both we ourselves, the council, and yourselves have undertaken that agreement. Now, if that's correct, I think we as a council need to know what those are, because what we then need to do is send a very stiff letter to our Member of Parliament to make him aware of these additional costs to the council, the additional public money which is being spent, which is outside of our control and outside your control, and make him aware of it. Because until you've raised it just now, I wasn't actually aware of that. So I think that's something that we do need to do specific. That's leave it separate to any internal processes that you may have identified, which is our responsibility. But things which are regulatory new requirements, I think we need to know what they are, and we need to identify with that and make our own representations by the leader and others to the Member of Parliament. That wasn't the point I was going to make, but because it's just been raised, I'm going to make it anyway. The point I was going to make goes to page 15 of the report. Page 16 of the report, which is in regard to the valuation of the shopping centres. And I was rather intrigued to see that we are felt to be relevant comparables this is London Road in Camberley, with the Elmsley Centre in Staines and the Galleries Centre in Bristol. Well, Bristol has a population of just under 500,000 people. Camberley has a population of under 40,000. The Galleries has 71 stores and services on a three-story building. That doesn't strike me as a particularly comparable situation to what is being outlined in this report, and it just struck me as surprising. Perhaps you could just helpfully clarify for us on that. Two other points, and then I will leave as well. On page 18 of the report, you talk about the council valued specialised assets, which are the Camberley Theatre and 6 public convenience assets. Now, I don't know anything about assets, I'll be honest. I'm happy to bow to your experience on that, but I didn't know that they were of that value, public conveniences. Obviously, the land itself must be, but I would have thought it would have been a bit lower. But perhaps you could just, very simply, for those who are not accountants, just explain how that figure has been made up. And then final point I wanted to make was going back to the original report, which isn't your one, but is the committee report, and paragraph 3, I think it was 3.6, where reference was made about the quality of the reports. So we're not talking about the timing, but we're talking about the actual the actual quality of the audits that take place. And I just wonder if you've got any observations to make about that particular paragraph. That's paragraph 3.6 on page 12 of the committee report, where I'm directly quoting, it described the overall results as concerning, with only 40% of audits judged good or requiring no more than limited improvement. I'd be interested as our external as to whether you have any comment about
Thank you. Can you comment on those points, please?
So I'll do my best, Chair, to address all of those. So firstly, just in terms of the regulatory requirements, I just wanted to be clear that they're the regulatory requirements that are placed on auditors. So we are regulated by, for example, the Financial Reporting Council. So they will inspect the work that we do, and they will comment on essentially how good it is, or whether they think there's any improvements that need to be made in that. But they don't just inspect BDO as a firm, they will inspect all firms, and the reports from all of those inspections will be made available to all auditors. And what we have seen in recent years is that the FRC is kind of driving the amount of, or an increased level of work on the assurance that auditors have or obtain over things like the valuation of property, plant and equipment. So I just wanted to be clear that it's not a regulatory requirement that has been placed on the council. It's been placed on us as auditors in terms of the work that we do around things like property, plant and equipment valuations. And so in responding to those requirements, it's increasing the amount of time that it takes us to do those audits. And obviously we would look to recover the cost of that from our clients.
Exactly. So it is public money being spent there then, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah. I don't dispute that, Councillor Bates. It's just I just wanted to be clearer that it's a regulatory requirement on ourselves rather than the council per se. Just in terms of the comparisons, I think the comparison sites that were identified by your own valuer, and there are a range of yields that's given by that are published by firms like Savills and CBRE, where they look to classify particular types of shopping centre depending on where they're located within a particular town. So for example, there will be out of town shopping centres, or there will be high street shopping centres. So they appreciate that there will be different population sizes, but in terms of location and the population that they serve, our valuer, and indeed the view of your own valuer, is that they are comparable sites, and that the yields that have been used in those valuations are broadly comparable. In terms of the buildings that you commented on, including I think it was public conveniences. So my understanding of those is that they are so they're valued on the basis of their depreciated replacement cost. So it's not the value at which you could sell those assets for, it's the value at which it would cost you to kind of build a replacement cost. And so the cost that they're reflected in your asset register and your accounts is what it would cost to rebuild those. And that's similar to the Camberley Theatre. And I think the vast majority of that amount does relate to the Camberley Theatre. Apologies, Councillor Bates, but your last question was, could you just repeat that one for me?
It was just in relation to, it wasn't your report, but the committee report itself that you may or may not have seen, I guess, but it was paragraph, I think it was 3.6, where it's referring to the quality of audits not being very good. That's not quite the wording in there. And just whether you as our external auditor have anything to say about that. I don't know if any of yours are in relation to this, but they've been inspected 15 financial statement audits and the results were concerning. So as I say, it doesn't say who they were or anything, but it's the quality now, not the time it takes.
Sure. Councillor Bates, would it be okay if I came back to you on that? Because I've not seen. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Martin.
Chairman, if I may just inject just for a moment, because I actually wrote the covering report. That's relating to the Redmond review, which was a review of all audit. Just to say on that, not exactly hot off the press, but there is talk now of a further £15 million of government money being distributed to offset the cost of external audit, and therefore to allow for more resources to be sort of injected into the external audit process. That's literally come out in the last week or so, and we're getting some modelling of what that might mean to Surrey Heath Borough Council, but it's still in consultation at the moment. So yeah, I think what I was trying to say in that report is that Redmond has raised some concerns, and the government are taking those recommendations on board and beginning to address it.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? I have one or two.
Sorry, Chair, can I jump in just to finish off?
Yeah, go on. I'll come along at the end after the Lord Mayor's show.
Thank you. You're very kind, sir. I actually, Steve, I got a couple of relevant points to what I went on about earlier. It's because we are almost, well, like I said, 1.5 years running before we get this signed off. Post-balance sheet events are crucial, and you would now have literally 15 to 18 months worth of post-balance sheet events. I mean, can you cover those within the time? I mean, you're going to throw more resources at it, because in the post-balance sheet event, quite a few things, particularly during COVID, has taken place. Yes, assets values have changed significantly, and the cash flows would have changed significantly. So you need to report those as well. Yeah. So that's going to take a little bit more time. Sorry, let me try and tie up. I don't want to keep at it. If I give you a few points, yeah, I'm more concerned when you do all this. Finally, which is most important one, is the loans we've had within the council. Some of them have been short term. We have been converting them to long term in the meantime. Now, are these loans sustainable, even long term sustainable? Yeah, that as a post balance sheet event, you need to understand whether they are sustainable or not. That's going to take up more resources of you. I'm just pre-warning you the stuff you guys have ahead of you. This is part of the sort of a penalty, I guess, for not completing it on time. Yeah. So this is all going to be a problem. Thirdly, most importantly, in all what I'm saying, all 3 points are very important. The reserves. Our reserves would have got a hammering. I would use the word, maybe it's too harsh, would have got depleted, I would have thought, in the pandemic year. Yes, you need to actually establish whether we have adequate reserves, and the reserve that was in the draft accounts, are they correct? In order to, because some of that, as I understand it, may be reversed this year. So would you consider reversing it into last year and getting your reserve correct as of 31st? I'm sorry, I also have to stop and think which year I'm in. 31st of March 2020, to make sure 2021 doesn't look odd. Yeah, these are points. I'm putting it to you. Yes, maybe you can answer today. Maybe you can come back with another presentation and we can have another long discussion. But these are very pertinent questions I put to you. These are all balance sheet items. And finally, most importantly, is the cash flow for this council. The forecast cash flow generally after normally, as I understand it, being a director of company and a charity chair of the director, you generally look for 1 year. Now, are you going to be looking for 1 year from the time you sign off? Which means you're going to look at 2022 now. Yes. I mean, good luck to you and to Martin. This is going to be a challenge.
Thank you.
Should I come back?
Please,
come back on those,
yeah.
Councillor Betton? Yeah. So You're absolutely right, Sashi, in terms of post-balance sheet events. So we do have to consider whether there are any further disclosures required in the accounts to reflect events that have taken place since the 31st of March 2020. So I'm certainly aware of decisions around the JPUT, for example, that we're actively considering as to whether disclosure of those needs to be made. And we do also look at loans as well, and to what extent those have been repaid or new ones have been taken out. So they are all things that we do consider, and we obviously keep an eye on the council's medium-term financial strategy, budget reports, in order to inform that. In terms of the council's reserves and perhaps cash flow, I might take those together. So yes, as part of the work that we do, particularly around valuation of property, plant and equipment, we are looking to see that the reserves have been accounted for correctly and have been stated correctly. We do also, as part of the work that we do to give a value for money conclusion, we will look at the adequacy of the reserves that the council has got. We won't conclude that work until we're ready to issue a final opinion, but it is something that we actively look at as we're completing our audit. And in terms of that cash flow forecast, you are again correct. We would be looking for around a year forward from when we issue our audit opinion. So for example, if we was to issue an audit opinion the beginning of May, we would be looking to May to look at what the council's cash flow forecasts are looking like up to the end of May 22. And we would work with Martin and his team to gather that information.
Okay, thank you. My questions are related not to accountancy, because I'm not an accountant, you'll be pleased to know. In November, we had a meeting at which you informed us that the audit would be completed by the beginning of January. It wasn't. It still isn't. That is a communication issue that I find in the private sector would be totally unacceptable. You have on page 37, communication with you. There are 4 types of communication with this committee, who we are all here now. Is it the case that you can't do anything without the committee's say so, or are you communicating with Mr. Hone and his team? Which comes back to the outstanding request. All of these issues that are outstanding, when actually were they asked for? When did you ask for those data? I'm concerned that things have not been moving as quickly as they should have done. Not by a long way.
Okay. Shall I take those questions now, Chair? Yep. Okay, so so the audit, we would obviously like to have finished the audit quicker than we have been able to. I think I did say when we met in November that our aim was to finish the audit by January. For some of the reasons that I've already gone into, we just haven't been able to do that. We are substantially complete in a number of areas, and where we're not, I've outlined the reasons as to why we're not able to complete. In terms of the issues on page 30, either 38 or 39, that are outstanding. So some of them have been outstanding for quite a considerable amount of time, I think it's fair to say, particularly around some of the items that relate to the collection fund. Now, I understand your revenues team will have had a significant number of challenges because of COVID, for example, but we simply aren't able to conclude our audit until we've had a response to those issues. I've obviously shared with Martin and his team on a regular basis the items that are outstanding, but I would, all I can really say is that some of those have been outstanding for a significant amount of time. In terms of communication, so we are required under auditing standards to communicate with you on a regular basis. So key stages of our audit that we would do that are at the planning stage, and we obviously brought a plan to you back in July of last year. We also are required, before we issue an audit opinion, to share with you our findings, which we would do in an audit completion report. We're not yet in a position to be able to share an audit completion report with you because a large amount of our work, or there are a significant number of areas where our work isn't yet concluded. So this progress report is just a way of sharing with you and keeping that ongoing communication with you in terms of how our audit is progressing.
Yes, I understand what you say. You sent a plan in on the 31st of July. As Councillor Malvaginam mentioned earlier, you have had to deal with 3 CFOs, Martin coming on board just before the November meeting. And although you sent in the planning document, there was no feedback, no response saying, where are your comments on this? Communication is a two-way process. So, it's like people who think that they've solved an issue by sending an email. You don't even know that the person has got the email half the time. So could communication have been better? And I would like to ask Martin about these, to comment on these outstanding issues for a considerable period of time. What's a considerable period of time?
Perhaps, Chair, if I take the question on the audit plan first. So my recollection is we presented that report to this committee over the summer. I can't remember the exact date.
Sorry, I'll just stop you there. In that, I assumed the chairmanship in April last year, so this is almost my anniversary. I had seen and heard of nothing until Martin Hone got an additional copy of the report from you. There was no feedback from you. That's not communication. Sending something in and then forgetting it is not communication. Communication seems to be a big issue with this delay, and I think it needs to be improved.
I think our standard process in terms of presenting to the audit committee, as I alluded to, is that we would report to you at 2 points during the year. So the first would be when we produce an audit plan. So we would report that to the audit committee, which essentially sets out key things like the audit risks that we've identified, our audit fees, timetable for our audit. And my recollection is that we did do that back in the summer, and that's what we would do for any audit. Apologies, Chair, but I'm not sure I understand the question in terms of feedback.
Well, Councillor Bates, your words of wisdom.
I understand it. It's very simple as far as I can see, and Councillor Bates, I'm sure you'll correct me if not. I think what you're saying is that when it was clear that there was issues of delay, why didn't the audit chairman be made aware of it? Now, it may be that you don't come and give a formal presentation to the committee, and that's understandable. But if there's these sorts of issues, I think what Councillor Betting is putting on behalf of a number of members is some concern regarding the communication issues that appear to be occurring and the delay that's there. Now, we're not here to allocate blame as to who, that, why, and all the rest of it, whether it's BDO internally or whatever, but it's there. So when we have a communication gap, we've got to try and address it and all take responsibility for that. And the view I would suggest is that now this has been identified, we need to do two things. Number one is that, I think this is one possibly for Mr. Holmes, is that the bullet points that have been identified as needing addressing, members need to have an update as to when they're going to be done and what is the issue with that and what can be done to address that, and some time frame as to when it will be done by. And obviously the second point is the chairman is just kept in the loop. Doesn't need to have any further kind of wider audit committee meetings, the rest of it. Chairman, was that the kind of thing that you had in mind?
Yes, I think communicating with a committee is all well and good, but it needs a person. It might be the Section 151 officer, it might be whoever, I don't know, but it needs a person, not an institution.
So Councillor Betton, I'm very happy, if it's you as chair of this committee, I'm very happy to meet with you on a more regular basis and update you on the progress of our audit. If that's something that you or the committee would want to do, then I'm very happy to do that, and I'll do that through Martin in the first instance. So I can ask Martin to arrange those meetings or calls on a more regular basis, if that's something that you would find helpful.
I think it would ease communication and facilitate things in the future.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to be me, but whoever's sitting in this chair, if you see what I mean. What about the issues that have been hanging on for a long time? Are we going to be able to resolve those in the near future? I'm asking Martin and you at the same time.
Okay, Chair, if I may, absolutely. I'm receiving emails as we're sitting here tonight that says quite a few of these things which are on that list have been resolved, and I don't know why, whether we just need to go offline with that, Steve and Michael, to just sort that out. Obviously, we've been through and we met with the chief executive as well about a month or so ago, and we went through some of these issues then. I think the list was shorter then, so I think there are some relatively new issues that are being raised as well. But obviously, the thing is is to get these all resolved now, and obviously work through to get that done as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, sorry, just a second, Sashi. Are we able to put a potential completion date on this? When would be a sensible time to expect the audit to be completed?
So, Chair, if I take that in the first instance, and I'll let Martin come back on that. I think the difficulty that we've now got is that we are moving headlong into our NHS audit peak. So I don't know how long it's going to take for Martin and his team to respond to a number of these issues that we've listed as being outstanding. But I think it's likely to be, if I'm being honest, it's likely to be June before we're able to look at anything that Martin is able to provide to us. And we would need to bring an audit completion report back to the committee. And I think that's looking like that would be your next meeting, which would be, I think I'm right in saying 26th of July.
Martin, what's the legal situation with regards to June?
Chair, I don't think there is any, but obviously that's a tremendously long time to have to wait.
And that's if you that's before you can look at it.
I don't, at the moment, Councillor Betton, I don't know when we're going to get a response to all of the queries that we've raised. So it might be something that I need to take offline with Martin and then come back to you with a more definitive timescale.
I think a definitive timescale is of the essence. Having waited this long, to sit there and say that you won't be able to look at it until June, is just ludicrous. Martin, how long before you can answer all of these questions do you think? And when did you get the questions?
Chair, I think since you asked me a direct question, I think we can answer them as quickly as possible, but it shouldn't take very long at all.
Okay, thank you for that. If it's not going to take very long, and you get the answers within the next week or so, when then could we might expect the audit report?
Well, you need to look at the answers, Councillor Betton. I can't sit here and say exactly how long it is going to take to work our way through the evidence that will be provided in support of the issues that are outlined on page 39 of our report. Until we receive a response to those, I can't sit here and give you a definitive answer as to how long it will take us to look at those. But I can say to you that we are going into our NHS peak, and we will be prioritising that work first. And the reason for that is that some of these have been outstanding for what we would consider to be quite a long time. So around January, we started raising questions on things like the collection fund, and that's some of the items that are listed on that page.
Councillor Malvaganam.
Chair, with all due respect to Steve, I've met Steve a few times, so I hope you don't mind me calling you Steve.
No, of course.
I mean, that's a ding dong you need to have with Martin, the day you gave and all that. I mean, I don't want this committee to get involved in that. You need to resolve this and resolve this fast. And it's something, it's not only Martin, I'm not saying Martin per se, you have had 3 CFOs, and the communication, like Cliff had, Mr. Councillor Betton has said, it's just appalling. If it was, it would have been resolved by now. Let's leave all that to aside, okay? We need, as a council, as a committee member, I'm not going to insist that we need this resolved before you start NHS. NHS is not priority for me. This council is priority for us, per se. This council has waited. I've already highlighted to you, Steve, that the problem you will come in July, you will expect Martin to do a cash flow for 12 months from that point onwards, which is 2022. Yeah, you would have to look at the asset valuation of depreciation, of reserves. All this will have to take that much more longer. It's going to take such an enormous amount of time. I'm finding it hard to get this around my head. And finally, I just don't want to rant on about it, because I think we'll go in circles in a minute, or I may end up going in circles. I don't want to. Letter of representation has to be signed off. Letter of representation is an important piece of document, and the councillor who signs off is accountable to the council for what he's signing off. If I remember right, the last letter of representation was signed off by the current leader, but he did it when he did it for a period when he was not there. If my memory was right, your predecessor and yourself, yeah, your predecessor gave the answer. The current leader was told X, Y, and Z. I have not seen that letter of representation personally. I don't think this committee has seen that particular letter of representation. We don't know whether this council, our leader, the current leader, signed something which he knew or which he relied on a CFO saying it's all okay, buddy, just not buddy. Okay, chap, you can sign it off. I mean, this is important part of a process. Letter of representation, I need to look at last year. We need to look at the last year letter of representation that was signed. I believe, if my memory is correct, your predecessor said he was told of problems within it, and still our leader signed it. I need to understand what those problems are. I don't want the same mistake to take place this year again. I really do not want to do that. So I'm going to, with that, I want to stop talking for this evening. I really am getting a bit irate about this whole thing.
Thank you.
So in terms of when we can complete our audit, I think the only thing I can undertake to do at this stage is talk to Martin and his team, establish with him when we're likely to receive the evidence and explanations that are outstanding, and work to come up with a timetable. In terms of the letter of representation, we're not yet in a position to draft our letter of representation that we will require because we haven't yet completed the audit. When we are, we will bring that in our audit completion report. I assume Martin wants to add something to that.
No, I just can't believe I could add anything to that, Steve. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Bates.
I can. I mean, this sounds totally shambolic, I'm afraid, and I'm sorry to put it in such blunt language. But if a member of the public has been sat watching this tonight, they'd be appalled at what we've just heard. We've got this clear communication issue that's been going on for some time. We need to get to the bottom of this now. So I very strongly suggest, and I can only offer this because as a way of trying to move, we can't do anything about the past, but we can do something about now and the future, that these points which are outstanding, or the 9 points which are highlighted in this report, which is a public document, page 39, that we as councillors on this committee, and I'm going to ask Mr. Hone in the first instance if he's happy to do it, actually sends us a note as to where we're at with these, whether he feels they've been done or not, so that we get to the bottom of this, because this is listening, watching and listening to this as an external person. It sounds absolutely ridiculous. And I also think, Chairman, it might be worth drawing this attention to the Chief Executive, because I think this is pretty embarrassing for us as a council now, and we need to probably get to the bottom of it and move things forward as quickly as we can.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly agree. There's no point, I think, in as everybody knows, going round in circles on this. Martin, if you can sort out these issues and email the answers with a copy to everybody, and then we'll try and keep a handle on what's going on. We need to speak to the Chief Executive again, I think, because I mean, I know you've had meetings between you. And it's just not acceptable, this continual delay. It may be a communication issue. If it is a communication issue, let's get it sorted, and sorted quickly. You need to have all the information. You need to complete the audit, and we need to make sure that you've got all the information that you ask for as soon as you ask for it. Which is why I asked, when these data were asked for, and I still haven't had a response to that particular question. So let's stop it here. Martin and Steve, if you establish clear lines of communication and copy me in and other members, that will be a step in the right direction. And I certainly don't want to be talking about this in June. Is anybody got anything else to say? No, me neither. Okay, thank you, everybody. I think that's the last issue. The next meeting is, as Steve correctly says, in July. I think it's my wedding anniversary, so I have no excuse for forgetting. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Good night.